Well, the CFL is moving the goalposts literally when it comes to gameplay in the coming seasons. As we've been telling you this week, the league has introduced a raft of rule changes aimed at making the game flow better and more enjoyable for fans to watch. One of those rules involves moving the uprights or goalposts to the back of the end zone while also shortening the end zone and playing field. For his thoughts on this, we have reached Luca Congi. He is a former CFL kicker who played with the Saskatchewan Roughriders from 2006 to 2011. Luca, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
So what do you think of the rule change to move the uprights back?
Honestly, for the most part, I'm generally aligned and okay with the rules. We'll see how the game plays out. It doesn't. I think it ultimately will reduce and eliminate some of the plays, but from a kicking perspective, the reality is 50-yard field goal is a 50-yard field goal, and so that's not going to change at all. I think some of the changes that will be impacted is more actually on some of the other components. So, for example, field goal returns, that's going to be pretty much completely eliminated from the game, which is one of the more exciting plays that can happen when you miss a long field goal. The potential return that could happen that typically does result in a larger return because of the imbalance of the alignment and the faster returners on the other end. So there's some other changes that are going to be impacted. If you think about the rouge, so you're not getting the single point after a missed field goal, which honestly I'm okay from that perspective, but it does impact your thinking and decision making as it pertains to your field goal making. For example, we would have a play where we would if you were tied, uh, you would actually we had a play that we would practice now, and we never actually executed in a real game, but you would have a play where you would aim the field goal out of bounds versus kicking it through the uprights because you do have a risk of hitting the goalpost, which would essentially result in 0 points, continue tie game versus kicking out of bounds, more certainty that you get at least the single point. So there's certain nuances in a game that are going to be eliminated. Some are going to be okay. Some is going to be, let's see how it all plays out at the end of the day.
So that's in terms of field goals and the goalpost, but I'm wondering in terms of, a perspective from a kickoff, will that shorter playing field have an impact on how kickers go about that?
At the end of the day, you're still going to try to hammer it as deep as possible when it comes from a kickoff perspective. Um, it'll be interesting to see, like again, from a returning perspective, how that will impact the number of returns that are happening. Hopefully it still will continue to be an exciting return game, and I think it will be, but we'll see how it all plays out. You look at the NFL, for example, and they're constantly figuring out the right rules from a return perspective. Now they've eliminated how long you can actually take your steps back because essentially last year the return game was completely eliminated. And you don't want to lose that, especially in the CFL game. Our game it the return game is a lot more enhanced than the NFL game, the American game. And so you don't want to lose that. And so from a kickoff perspective, I think it will still remain in a decent position, but we'll have to see how it pans out towards the end. The thing about coaches, they're very creative. So they're going to figure out ways to maximize the rules, right? And so some of the things are a little bit unknown until you actually do it and run it, and you'll see game strategies evolve along with the rules.
Well, kind of on that note, Luca, I'm wondering if you think, this is going to improve the overall game, make it more enjoyable for fans to watch, as the CFL has pointed out.
Yeah, honestly, I'm generally okay with the rules that are being proposed. I think a lot of them make sense. The reality is I'm hoping that they would have done their research and thinking through and kind of nailed down why these rules, why this is the right time. I obviously can't speak to that, but when you think about the overall rules themselves, I do think generally they will improve the game. And I think it's okay to try certain things, but obviously you don't want to lose the essence of the Canadian game, and I don't think we are necessarily, right? I think you still have the Canadian ratio, you still have the 65-yard field, the play clock. I know it's modifying a bit, so we'll see what that plans out because I was listening to the commissioner around what the final 3 minutes will look like. And you hope that that doesn't hurt the final 3 minutes because I think that would be a detriment, right? If all of a sudden the game clock changes the number of possessions that are happening in the final 3 minutes, you're going to lose that excitement that comes in the Canadian game where, anything can happen. You can any comeback is kind of possible, so to speak. You don't want to lose that. That to me is one of the benefits of this game over the American game. But aside from that, I do think fundamentally a lot of the core content, the core rules that make the Canadian game special are still there and intact. So I think the commissioner's done a good job balancing between trying to push the envelope, making rule changes to kind of change the game, but also maintain the core essence of what makes the Canadian game exciting. Proof will be in the pudding, as they say, once it comes out and changes are rolled out, and we'll see how it all ends up being in terms of, the end result, and hopefully it results in a positive change.
And that is something we've been hearing from people. Kind of their biggest concern around this is losing that sort of Canadian uniqueness to this game. And you mentioned there you're not overly concerned about that eroding away. But why is it so important that Canada have sort of its own version of gridiron football?
That's a good question. I think first and foremost, we want to be unique to the NFL because then, it makes it's like anything else. If you have a business and your business is very similar to others, you got to stand out a certain way. And so we don't want to be just like the NFL game because then, why would fans tune in necessarily to the CFL game versus the NFL game? The fact is that we have a value proposition up here for our game that makes it special, unique, exciting. And so it's not just about, maintaining the Canadian game. The Canadian game is a better game. Like, I think we just got to understand that the Canadian game provides a lot of great value that, obviously a lot of fans really like and enjoy and have, been accustomed to over the many, many, many years, decades. And so you don't want to lose that, not only for the Canadian game, but there's a lot of rules, the way the game is played that makes it exciting, that makes it a better brand of football, in my opinion, over the American game. And so you don't want to lose that because it does make it special. It makes it unique. It makes it different. And that's the value proposition, if you will, as to why you want to watch the Canadian game versus the American or the NFL game.
I am curious, though, given your time as a player and now as a fan watching, are there any other changes that you think the league should make or maybe they should have made in this round of announcements?
It's a good question. I haven't given that much thought. There's nothing that really jumps out in my mind. I do like the goalpost moving back. I think that is something that is I think it will help in terms of the way the game is played and from a touchdown perspective. It can be a distraction to a degree. So, and from a kicking perspective, it doesn't really change much from my perspective. Again, the major thing from there is you're going to obviously eliminate the field goal returns, which is an exciting play that you're essentially eliminating. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But aside from these rules right now, there's nothing for me that jumps out as to say we need to make any further changes. I think this is as much change maybe you want to do at this stage in the game. This is a fair bit of change under the current new regime, a new commissioner. So I think this is as far as you want to go at this point and see how it plays out. And then, there may be some more modifications that need to come after.
Okay, Luca, it's good to hear from you. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.